Are his arms tired? I've been waiting 4 hours to tell that joke. And this is all on camera too, so you all laughed and that was all recorded. Alright, so John here is going to tell us about the Hidden Figures in Astronomy. So this is going to cover not just the movie Hidden Figures, which is a really good movie if you haven't seen it, but also other hidden figures that we may not have heard about. Alright. Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah? Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming. My talk is going to be a little bit different from the other two. I'm not really going to talk about science, but I'm going to talk a little bit about science history. So, talk is titled Hidden Figures in Astronomy. So, to start with, let's go over a brief history of astronomy. When you think about astronomy, the names that come to mind are Galileo, Kepler, Newton, and maybe more recently, Hubble and Einstein, but there's something that all of these faces have in common. You might notice they're all old white men, right? So that's because our history has a little bit of a selective memory in that regard. So what I want to do is cover a few important people in the history of astronomy that you don't think of immediately, that aren't these old white men. So the inspiration for this talk is from the movie Hidden Figures, which, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's an Academy Award nominated film, and it tells the story of 3 black women that played vital roles in the NASA spaceflight program. So they're Katherine Johnson, Mary Jackson, and Dorothy Vaughan. And their stories are amazing and deserve to be heard. Since the movie already covers them, I'm not going to cover them today, but I recommend that you watch that movie. Instead, I'm going to cover a few people that were more directly related to astronomy history, so studying the stars, galaxies. And to start with, I'll actually be talking about another old white man, and that's Edward Charles Pickering. So Edward Charles Pickering was the head of the Harvard College Observatory for 42 years, and what he's actually most famous for is hiring this group of women known as the Harvard Computers. And these women, he hired them because they were a lot cheaper than the men that he hired, and they seemed to be very efficient and got a lot of great work done for him. The problem is that the history books talk about all the great discoveries and accomplishments of Edward Charles Pickering, and they don't talk about the accomplishments of all of these women who actually did most of the work in reaching those goals. So I'll talk about a few of them right now. So first is Annie Jump Cannon. Annie Jump Cannon manually classified over 350,000 stars, which is more than any other person in history has done. And she also helped to develop the classification scheme for stars that we still use today. So those of you that have some familiarity with astronomy may have heard of the stars that's classified as OV. Obviously, there are a lot of astronomers in the room. And so that scheme was developed by Annie Jump Cannon at Harvard. And she classified all of the brightest stars in the southern sky and used that scheme that we continue to use today. She has recently been recognized for her work by having an award named after her, the Annie Jump Cannon Award, which is given to a female astronomer early in her career who has done some great work. And we actually have this year's winner of the Annie Jump Cannon Award in the audience today, Becky Dawson, who will be speaking later today. Becky's my advisor.
Well done.
Okay, another one of these Harvard computers was Henrietta Swan Leavitt. And Henrietta Swan Leavitt's contributions are a little more technical, so I won't go into the details of it, but essentially what she did was she helped us to develop a system of measuring the distances to galaxies. And so that sort of gave us the baseline for which to measure the scale of the universe as a whole. So what she did was she looked at variable stars in nearby galaxies and noticed a relationship between the period of the brightness changes in those stars and the intrinsic brightness of the star. So that allows us to calculate a distance to those stars and therefore calculate distance to galaxies where we see similar stars. And her work was actually later used by Edwin Hubble to determine that the universe is in fact expanding. And since then, we more recently have learned that expansion is accelerating. So that's a whole other talk for a different time. So now I'm going to move a little bit away from the Harvard computers and talk about someone from more distant history. That's Benjamin Banneker. So Benjamin Banneker was a free African-American astronomer during prime-time slavery in the United States. See by the dates there. He was largely self-taught, and he developed almanacs that were sold commercially that had various information about the stars and planets in our the star and planets in our solar system, and how they move over time. So what that's called an ephemeris. So that's just a fancy word for saying the motion of the planets over time. And so he calculated how the planets would move and where there would be conjunction, so where you would see different planets near each other in the sky at certain times of the year. And he also made various other calculations, like the times of high and low tide in the Chesapeake Bay area and things like that. And so these all were a part of his almanac that he published. And the quote on the left here is a quote from the publishers of one of these almanacs. I won't attempt the Old English, so I'll let you read that yourself. I don't know why it keeps cutting out. But yeah, so Benjamin Banneker is a really interesting story because he sort of defied the conventions of the time and was really able to be successful and do good work and useful work for people in astronomy during a time where when African Americans were generally not let's say well regarded in society. All right, so the last person I want to highlight today is Mariah Mitchell. So that is pronounced Mariah, despite the spelling that looks like Maria. Mariah Mitchell is very near and dear to my heart because I spent a summer working at the Mariah Mitchell Observatory, which is named after her and is in her hometown of Nantucket, Massachusetts. So what Mariah did was the first thing she did was discover a comet, for which she was given a gold medal from the King of Denmark at the time. And she also became the first professional female astronomer. So that happened when she was hired as a faculty member at Vassar College in the late 1800s. And she was actually the first professor hired at Vassar College, which at the time was an all-women's school, and has since then mixed gender. And her legacy lives on in Nantucket with the Mariah Mitchell Association. So what that is a group that does various different efforts in science. So they do environmental studies, they have an aquarium, and they have this observatory here, which is where I worked for a summer. Every summer they bring in undergraduate students to work at the observatory and do astronomy research, and in remembrance of Mariah Mitchell, they always have at least half of the students there be female students in astronomy. And so that's a really great place and a great way to remember one of our founding mothers of astronomy. And yeah, so that's all I have today, but I'm happy to take any questions and talk. There are a lot of people that didn't make into this talk that I could talk about for hours, so yeah, thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Does the word computer come from the job computer?
Yeah. The question is, does the word computer come from the job computer? And I don't know the answer to that question.
Any other questions? So why don't you tell us about one of those people that you think have time?
Okay. Well, another one of the Harvard computers was Williamina Fleming, and she was actually Edward Charles Pickering's maid before she was hired as by him to go over his data, and he was actually quoted as saying to one of his employees at the time that he thinks that his maid could do better calculations than that person, and then he hired his maid and she could. and she ended up managing the computers for a few years.
Was Beatrice Tinsley on your list of the American?
Yes, but I don't know much. Beatrice
Jonathan,
Tinsley.
we should talk.
Yeah. Next time.
All right, thank you, John. All right, so